those dots.
You mean you could be accused of trying to influence the future?
Certainly so. And in fact, this technology, taken to its ultimate level, could easily be used to hijack the future.
Not only that, George, but we've recently come across something called memering, where there appears to be groups, and we don't know if they're state players or non-state actors.
All we can say is that they're organized.
They're organized, right.
And what are they doing?
They're planting and watering and harvesting memes. Memes are like little thought viruses.
All right, give me an example.
Oh, you might go to a particular forum in a day where there's a lot of heavy political news, and you read this heavy political news, and it may have an independent media slant, and all of a sudden the forum gets filled up with questions about whether or not you should let your daughter marry a black man. All right. It's always highly charged. It always goes to these visceral issues. It's always intended to distract and divert and requantify and requalify emotion.
Why?
That I don't answer. I don't answer why questions because that goes to intent.
That's what you're for, George.
And I haven't figured it out yet. There's a lot of speculation on the web about the powers that be.
Is somebody trying to sabotage your work?
No, it doesn't go towards us. It's a greater social impact. We're just simply picking it up.
Right. It's more like a control point, trying to push emotions or preset people so that they'll react in a certain way when a supposedly random event like a mass shooting takes place, that kind of thing.
Do you think the Internet can influence people's opinions before anything even happens? Is it that strong now? Who wants that?
Yes. It certainly has the potential on a number of levels, and if one wanted to be really mundane about it, you could talk about merely the neuro-linguistic programming aspect of it. And that is to say, the more times you read about a particular mindset, the more connections within your brain are made, connecting those kinds of words. So you're pre-set up to react to those words.
I think, for example, Republican candidate Ron Paul, who's still hanging in there, barely, but he's got a pretty good platform. I think he was able to utilize the Internet better than any of the other candidates. And, if
I think you're putting a different slant on. I mean, sorry to interrupt, but from our perspective, it works the other way.
How so?
The reason Ron Paul is successful is because of what he is harmonizing with, what he's resonating with in terms of the general memes that are out there.
See, but where I was getting was that I think he effectively has been able to use the Internet to influence people who use computers, and therefore people who use computers are supporting him in record numbers, and it gives the appearance that he's got this incredible support system, which he may have.
There's two aspects of this, though, that we've got to consider. That is that he was simply the right person that came along at the right time, that everybody was simply there waiting for that message to be delivered by a national prominent figure. I buy into that. Another aspect of it is that to a certain extent this works against him because there's a larger subset of the populace that only gets their media from the mainstream. And because Ron Paul's support is primarily Internet-based, he can be isolated, as he has been.
I agree with that.
Not only that.
And that's an example of memering, by the way.
Because my next question was going to be, why can't he kind of pull out from the pack and do better if he's doing so well on the Internet? And you just answered that.
Not only that, but in terms of harmonizing, remember, we've got this whole rebellion meme. And one of his early on slogans or visuals was revolution with the E reversed.
Yeah.
And so he harmonized very closely with that. And then as the campaign has gone along, some of the harmony has been lost with that particular persuasion block.
That is actually a predictable effect, though, because it goes to the core of things, which is that language changes continuously. And in order to keep a social momentum of that magnitude going, you've got to continue to harmonize with the developments of the language as it goes forward.
George,
almost on a day-to-day basis, really.
Can this computer work, Cliff or George, be skewed, or can you be tricked?
We could be. Everybody on the Internet would be aware of it, though, because of the massive amount of memering that would be necessary to get past it would have to be something staggering on the order of, say that virtually every fora, or every 10th actually, that would really be all it would take, reported that Mao Zedong had arisen from the dead, and that there was now a new religion formed around this. No offense to religion nor Mao Zedong, just an example being offered. We would pick that up, and we would be tricked by that, yes. But at 10% levels is what it really requires to get through the process.
Do you pick up any information, for example, that the government might disclose its full knowledge of UFOs? Or can you go that far?
We have big information bulges, we call them, around what we call the context of the contact. And indeed, we have those. We don't have it specific for the US of A government at this point. But we do have, I want to say, an escalation of things pointing to some kind of a looming apex, a looming peak.
Now, what does that mean?
That over the past few years, since the year 1999, we've been seeing the reported rise of UFO sightings escalate. And the escalation is reaching a point where, using ladder math, it'll soon pass the area where 51% of the population is reporting it.
But does that tell us that we are indeed being visited?
I would say so. I would say actually that what tells us more than anything is how the government reacts.
Can this get information from people if they don't even want you to have it? I mean, is it that strong?
On the assumption, we have many flaws in the system. I mean, let's not make it more than it is. It's very crude. It's very stupid. Software is very stupid.
But does it get better every year?
It gets better all the time because we're always tweaking on it. But basically, if we don't program in for it, we can't pick it out. So it's possible that a lot of stuff slips by and certain things were keyed in on more than others. I would grant that that's probably an operating principle that we hit all the time because we've limited ourselves to a certain number of entities because we just can't report on everything. So in order to slice and dice the whole of the complexity of the planet into something reasonable to report out requires necessarily a refocusing. Does that make sense?
Not only that, George, but remember that we have to have the word in our context. One of the reasons we got aspects of military and accident prior to 2001 was we weren't specifically tuned into the word terrorism. So if something,
by the way, it had not reached the public level of recitation that we've got it today. Everybody says the word constantly. It's getting to the point where it's losing its effectiveness. And of course, by the way, look at how the people who promulgate their power off of it are also losing their effectiveness.
Well, that's true.
And so if we have a future event and it's formed up around a whole new word like fibble-zoink, we're not out looking for fibble-zoink yet. So we would have to describe that as aspects and attributes of something else.
And we have that something else built in there, and it has a very rude name, which we won't go into. But we had to have something that we're a category where we could just lump the unknown and the officially denied. Boy, is that an active area.
Or you'd miss it.
Correct.
Right, and again, it's kind of like the UFO thing. We don't know if we're going to actually see contact or if it's just going to be meetings on the evening news that are widely publicized. Well, but we know there's something out there.
Now, generally, when do events occur? When do things happen after you think you see them?
It depends on which broad category of type of language we get the information from. We noticed early on, as I was talking earlier, how certain aspects of fear have greater duration or intensity than others. So we have the fear words that are verbs. They're going to have a big impact, usually right away. They may have a modifier that tends to stretch that out. So we've sliced the data into what we call immediacy data, shorter term and longer term. And the immediacy data means it'll happen usually between 3 days and 3 weeks. And we were pretty good with the accidents prior to the Greek Olympics.
Okay, that's a pretty fascinating window. We'll be back in a moment with more on Coast to Coast AM. I'm George Norrie. Don't go away. We'll get into some more predictions this hour, George and Cliff, but just looking over some of the past ones, earthquakes, 300,000 dead, hurricanes, disasters, 9/11. Doesn't this ever show us anything that's positive? George?
Oh, unfortunately, no.
Why not? Because it just doesn't pick up those kinds of emotions, or what?
No, it isn't that so much. It's the level of intensity that is associated with more negative emotions.
Which is absolutely true.
Yeah, you don't find large groups of people, 200,000 or 1 million people all being happy at once. You do find them being shocked at buildings falling over, or
scared,
or CNN breaking news, this just in kind of stuff.
Well, that's true. I mean, when I was in the television news business years ago, news generally is morbid. It's negative. It's unhappy. I mean, every once in a while we'd end the program with a funny, as we call, kicker, a whimsical story, something funny. I sometimes always wondered, maybe we should start the newscast with one of these things.
Well, the political stuff going on at the moment's close.
Yeah, to a certain extent, but you have to have the right mindset to view it that way.
Yeah, right. You can't have bought into the whole deal.
Yeah.
All right, Clif, what are we picking up now? What's out there?
Well, we've got a meme that developed back last year. We may have mentioned it at the time, called Millions of Small Particles. We knew that the housing situation was bad. Now the housing situation is surrounded by contexts related to murder. Not simply death of the dollar, but also the murder of the housing industry. It shows up both in what we call the global pop and the populous USA. And so the implications are that we're going to see virtually a seizure or a lockup of the ability to transfer property around, probably due to the mass combination of the dollar dropping, the credit drying up, and some derivatives that are going to go bad, some interest rate decisions that are unwise, some geopolitical stuff that's coming out of the Middle East. And what am I leaving out, George?
I think probably the leading edge that we saw, I think it was Ohio and also out in California, the people going to bankers' homes, throwing sharks. And that
was a part of a big squatters meme, or what we're calling the fuzzy revolution. Because it'll be at the edges of the social order. It won't express too much in the way of violence. But it'll certainly be disruptive, and it'll stick in the craw of a lot of the establishment because they don't want it now, and they can't deal with it now. But this is going to be a natural response to the way conditions are, and it'll be squatting and self-organizing collectives, what we call SOCs, where people might decide that, okay, there's a subdivision of 2,500 homes, and none of them are sold, and they've been sitting empty for a year. We'll just en masse move in and set up our own little village, that kind of thing.
So that's out there, and that is widespread.
We're picking up as a subset of what we call the revolution metadata layer. And that's a large grouping of around the word revolution rebellion that's coming out of all of the various entities, and what makes it a metadata layer. And it's been active for a number of years, but it'll become very active as we pass our October release language period.
Well, we're seeing the build of it now, George. For example, late this month, we're expecting to see a big uptick in people repudiating debt, and then the revolution or rebellion means